Life's tough. Get a helmet, man. I'm too pregnant for this.
Half a century has passed, and people still think homosexuals are dirty and sleazy, and it's a moral choice, and this a moral lifestyle, and we can't get over this hurdle. So what the campaigners came up with was, well, hang on a second, if it's like being black or if it's like being a woman, then if somebody doesn't like it, they're a bigot. That works. So the Born This Way mythology was created to meet ideological objectives out of whole cloth. And it has never been even remotely demonstrated by science. The closest that anybody will truthfully get is say, there appear to be some people who have some sort of predispositions, maybe, but it is vastly more to do with nurture than it is to do with nature. And in any case, even if you are one of those people that just pops out, in sequins, singing Mariah Carey, it is possible to overcome what are disordered urges. They call it unwanted same-sex attraction. I think it's the PC term that YouTube's right with. It is possible to, even though you may be suffering with what is a terrible curse, not do it.
You know what's interesting, because I've had to reconsider that my childhood programming on this, but I love that you call it the Born This Way mythology. That's a great way of saying it, because that's what it was. You're born this way. And
it's worse than mythology, actually. It's propaganda. It's political propaganda.
It is political propaganda. And I think that the best example of that currently, because we're living through that, is this insistence that people are born trans. And you can see how they infect that propaganda, how it starts. And thinking about Hollywood, how it starts with the television screens, and I Am Jazz was sort of the first time that they did this TLC show. I don't know if you're familiar with this. And
I know.
And they said, actually, jazz is trans, and it became this cultural phenomenon, got so much coverage. And nobody tells you the end point and the struggles that jazz is facing today. And they were able to get all of these kids. I grew up, nobody was trans. And now all of a sudden you have all of these parents who are convinced that their children are born something other.
You said it exactly right. People are always amazed at the horrors that parents can do to their own children. But they shouldn't be, because people do all kinds of terrible things to their kids. Whether it's everyday neglect or it's something more serious and more dramatic. The trans thing fixed a really big problem for the parents of gay kids, or kids who show signs of those sorts of behaviors early on, which lots do, because the damage happens early. It fixed a big problem, which is, what did I do wrong? Because if you don't have a gay child that you messed up, but instead have a trans child who has a problem, who has a disease, who has a syndrome, who has something on them, then you're off the hook. You're not bad parents. In fact, you're victims, because your kid has got this thing that nobody would ever want for their own child, and so you become brave, and you become a hero, and your child becomes the crucible in which your social anxieties about having messed up as a parent and made your kid gay, which is what you did, are resolved and sanctified, because in fact, all of these kids who are seized and mutilated, if they were left alone, would be what we would call, like gay men. And if without the interference, without the injection into the process of these crazed trans campaigners, they would have a hope of a way out. But once you've started chopping things off, you create so many psychological and body image problems that you're no longer just dealing with the fact that you had an overbearing mother, an absent father, and you didn't form sustainable platonic relationships with men as a young boy, and something went wrong in your head, or that you got raped, and it happened because it could happen for any mixture or all of those reasons. I had a bit of all of them. Once you start chopping part of that person off, you cut them off from salvation, you cut them off from redemption, you cut them off from hope, because if you can stop doing that stuff, at least you're still you. And you have potential and possibility, and you could do and be anything as long as you're still like, in possession of your health, your faculties, your whatever. But once you start mutilating somebody because parents find it easier to believe their kids have a disease, which is not their fault, then they messed up as parents and that they're gay. Even if you were able to somehow switch the trajectory of your desire from one sex to another, which does happen. It's not, not everybody who goes into conversion therapy wins. It's, best case scenario, you got like a 1 in 5 chance. It's not good odds. Better than cancer, but it's not great. If you start cutting things off and mutilate, there's nowhere to come home to. And the problem that gay kids have is that they start early on being different people in front of different audiences. So they know that, for instance, they can't be their sassy selves in front of their grandparents, let's say, because they're whatever. And this eventually, unchecked, becomes a kind of fractured personality, which is the bedrock reason why gay people are always so dishonest and always up to stuff, because they have these competing identities that are not reconciled, and they are playing characters in front of different people who become almost like fully fledged people in their own right. And it is a kind of, it's it's layperson schizophrenia. It's not schizophrenia, but it becomes disorientating and it becomes debilitating.